Hey folks, Aaron Beyer with Gleaner Combines. We're here in Kansas harvesting some soybeans, and I thought I'd take a moment to show you how we configure and set the combine for soybeans. So let's start at the feeder house. So of course we're using a DynaFlex draper head, so we're going to go ahead and make sure that we have the variable speed header drive set to the minimum speed. And then if you follow me here inside, you want to make sure the lockout is set to lock that speed in the slowest position. The reason we slow that down on our DynaFlex is because we don't want to overspeed that cutter bar and really do some damage to the cutter bar. So if we continue around the left-hand side of the machine, the next thing we're going to set is our chopper speed. So of course, when we're harvesting soybeans, we want to have our chopper, our fine cut 2 chopper in the high speed position. So you're going to take and install the large sheave on the drive. Again, this is all done with tools installed on the machine already, and then a 9/16 impact to be able to zip these bolts out, in and out, and then you can swap your sheaves. And then again, you put the large sheave in place of the small sheave, and then you bolt your small sheave up here underneath to be able to store that on the machine as well. So let's continue around the back side of the machine. We'll kind of keep walking, and we'll go up inside the engine compartment next. So the thing that's really important about Gleaner combines is we have one concave for all different crops. So we don't have to really worry about changing concaves when we go from corn to soybeans or wheat or sorghum or any other crops. We have one concave that fits all different crops. So when you open the processor door, there's not a lot that you're going to need to do inside here as far as configurations. But there's a couple instances where you might. Now, if you get a lot of buildup of material around the outside of the cage, there's a plate that installs right over here on the left-hand side of the separator cage that fills in this area that makes that material drop above or below to be able to keep this area clean. The other thing is there's a cover that goes underneath the chopper. You can install that chopper and make sure that everything that covers underneath the chopper to make sure that material flows out, because the majority of your separation should be done by that point in time. If you're still separating soybeans from the crop mat, you might need to make some adjustments to your concave over here on the right to be able to increase the amount of threshing and the amount of material that's coming over here on the right-hand side as opposed to the left. So another adjustment we can make is to our stationary knives at the bottom of the chopper bed. Now, when I'm setting a machine, our fine cut 2 high-speed chopper does a really good job of destroying the stalks and stems of soybeans when it's in high speed. So typically I go ahead and leave those stationary knives out, but if you need to increase the chop, you want to slowly start introducing those knives and see if that chop quality increases as you kind of incrementally introduce those knives into the chopper bed. The reason I do that is to conserve some horsepower and some fuel. And again, if we're doing a good job of chop on the ground, I don't need as much knife as I've got there. So I want to just slowly introduce those until that chop quality gets to the point where I like it. Never exceed the soybeans level though. And of course, when you shut this processor door, you need to make sure both the right hand and the left hand side are completely latched to make sure you don't fill your engine compartment full of chaff and debris. So the next thing that you want to adjust is make sure the rotor gearbox is in the right gear. Now, this is a point of what you're kind of doing with the machine. In soybeans, you can run it one of two ways. A lot of operators run it in the high speed to get a higher rotor speed for better separation, and they keep that low gear there in case they plug it. Then they can switch it, open up the concave, put it in neutral, reduce the rotor speed, put it into low, and then engage it, and then push that wad out. Now, that works. It works with a Gleaner combine pretty well, but the thing is you're putting a lot of load, a lot of extra stress on the input shaft of the rotor drive gearbox. So that's why on the T-Series we have the rotor reverse motor now, to where you can reverse the rotor without putting that undue stress on the gearbox. So I like to run it in low, to run my rotor speed lower. Still a little higher range to be able to increase our separation, but lower to be able to reduce the cracks and splits in the bin. So again, you've got two different options. You've got high speed and low speed. And again, you can set it depending on what machine you have, or whatever your preference is. But just know that you want to run that belt as far to the middle of the range of the driven sheave to make sure you don't bottom the belt out, so it can grip when it needs to really push and really load up that machine and really put the power to the rotor drive gearbox. So whatever speed you run, and we'll talk a little bit more about speed when we're setting the machine inside the cab, but whatever speed you run, make sure you're in the appropriate gear to do so. We're going to be in low. So the final spot that we'll touch on the outside of the machine is over here on the right-hand side of the feeder house. So what we're going to change over here on the right-hand side of the feeder house is the speed of the front and rear feed chains. And we do it by switching this sheave's position. You're going to take this and detension it. You see the tensioner back here. We're going to take the tension off the belt. We're going to remove the belt from the sheave, flip the sheave to the other position, and then reinstall the sheave. When harvesting soybeans, you're going to use the large sheave. Reroute the belt according to what speed you're going to go on. There's a little decal on the right-hand side to show you that. And then retension that belt. Doesn't take too long. It's a 3/4 inch socket. I have a nice long socket that I use to be able to fit over the tensioner with an impact. Take that off real quick. Same 3/4 head bolt, 3/4 socket. Flip our sheave and then tighten it all back up. Again, doesn't take very long, pretty quick process. The next step of the process is done inside the operator cab, to where we make adjustments to the components of the machine: rotor speed, concave clearance, chaffer and sieve setting, and fan choke position. So when you got the machine turned on and the terminal wakes up here, you're going to go into the combine main menu, select crop settings. Make sure you have soybeans selected in the top field. This tells the machine what crop's being harvested. If you have an ag leader equipped machine, it automatically tells the YMM or the ag leader module that you're harvesting soybeans. So that way when you do your calibrations, it can associate the correct calibrations, the correct vibration calibration, all of that information, so it's assigned correctly. The next thing you're going to do is you're going to look at these factory settings and what the user settings, and you're going to adjust the settings using the buttons here on the MFA to be able to make the numbers match. Now there's no OK button that it automatically adjusts. You have to use the buttons here on the MFA. So we'll go ahead and start the machine up. With the engine started, we're going to go ahead and start the processor. Take it to maximum engine speed. And now you'll see the current settings are all listed here on the right-hand side. We're going to adjust the rotor speed first, and we're going to try to increase that rotor speed to where we kind of work in a balance. We have the maximum amount of separation while doing the least amount of damage to the soybeans. Rotor speed causes damage to either the corn kernel or the soybean. So we want to try to find a happy medium to where we have the most separation, but at the same time doing the less damage to the soybean. The natural flow processor does a great job already of trying to decrease the amount of damage, but that rotor speed, if we have it too high, it can still crack soybeans. So we usually start off at that 400 RPM. If we see cracks, then we slow it down. If we have issues with rotor loss at that point, we speed it up. So the next adjustment we're going to make is to our concave clearance. Our concave clearance is going to adjust the amount of thresh that we have in soybeans. A tighter concave clearance is going to thresh more, and a wider concave clearance is going to thresh less. Depending on the condition of the soybeans, if they're really dry, you can run a wider concave setting and still be able to get a complete thresh. But if you start to see pods, unthreshed pods in the bin, then you need to tighten that concave down to be able to increase the amount of thresh and get the bean out of the pod. The other thing you got to consider too is that a concave clearance is going to adjust your rotor loss. If you have too wide of a clearance and those soybeans are not being threshed across the concave, you're going to have to close that concave down. It's going to pass through the whole machine if it's not threshed at the concave. And that unthreshed pod is going to go out the back of the rotor. So again, that concave clearance is going to affect your rotor loss. But you also got to balance that with capacity. If you choke that down too tight, you're really going to have a tough time trying to get capacity moving through the field. So if you really start to lug that engine down, it could be because your concave is set a little too tight. Again, you're going to use those two adjustments, rotor speed and concave clearance, to affect both your thresh and your rotor loss or your separation. So the next adjustment you're going to make is to your choke position and your chaffer and sieve. And this is where you're in your cleaning chute. Again, we have two stages of cleaning. That top stream of air, as those beans and pods, threshed pods, are falling to the shoe, you're going to manage your shoe load and how much loss you have by adjusting the fan choke position. More air gets you more separation through that waterfall of grain coming off the accelerator rolls. And so the more air you push through it, the more crop, mog, everything other than the seed is going to be able to be blown out. But at the same time, you're going to run into the problem where you're blowing too much material if you have too much air. So again, you're kind of walking a balance between the two. The other thing the fan choke position is going to affect is the amount of float that material, as it's running across the chaffer, that it's going to float more material and separate across the cleaning. Again, that second stage of the cleaning from the cleaning fan. So we're going to adjust the chaffer and the sieve to be able to allow the smaller pieces, the seeds, the kernels, maybe the smaller pieces of mog to fall through the chaffer, while the larger stems and everything else blows out the back or moves out the back. And then that second stage, that sieve, you're going to adjust it to where it's just enough to let the beans fall through and everything else gets returned back to the rotor. So again, you're going to adjust those according to what you see in the field and what you see in the tank and what you see on the ground. Those adjustments can really kind of vary, but you just go ahead and set it according to this and then adjust one thing at a time until you get that bin sample that you're looking for.